Hello viewers, and welcome back to another episode of A Old Man with a Smartphone. This video I want to talk about Hurricane Helene a moment, ham radio, and lessons learned. I've been following this Hurricane Helene since it happened. The disaster of it is still not completed. There are still people without. They are in dire straits. Winter is setting in, things are getting worse. Hurricane Helene is by no means done. The storm itself is done. The damage caused is still under repair and being mitigated. And the displaced people and those that are still affected by it are definitely, they're not back to normal by any stretch. There is indeed a number of charities that are doing the best they can for everybody. Anyone who can, I would encourage you to reach out to these charities, do your research on these charities, and help out if you can. Moving along from that, one of the lessons we had learned was duty cycle of radio. These ham radios have a duty cycle, your transmit versus receive, and usually you'll find it about 20%. What we learnt was from one of the net control guys. He actually used a couple of radios because he kept burning them out, and he wasn't using the inexpensive radios. He was using good quality radios made by reputable companies, but it does have a duty cycle. He had pushed well beyond that. There's a few things we can do here, one of which you'll notice that my radio is set to low power. This will drastically increase my duty cycle over high power, and it'll allow me to stay into operation quite a bit longer without burning out my final stages. If I'm transmitting at 50 watts and I'm running a net control where I am doing an awful lot of transmitting, relaying information and not as much receiving, I can actually burn this radio out pretty hard. Likewise, with the radio build for emergencies I'm about to do, that will contain a crossband repeater, and when you use a crossband repeater, duty cycle is something you have to consider, and output power is something that you really have to consider to protect your radio, because it will kill itself if you over transmit. During Hurricane Helene, one of the things I noticed is immediately afterwards, an entire army of ham radio operators, all civilians, come together and began volunteering. One of those gentlemen, who lived in a small community that was very heavily desolated, it was cut off from all means of transportation and all modes of communication. Their only communication out of the disaster zone happened to be a $25 Baofeng UV5R radio programmed to operate on a repeater. And this particular radio operator, even though he is a certified radio operator, had never actually transmitted before at all, ever. He, for whatever reason, got himself all certed. He bought the piece of equipment. He programmed it to operate through the repeater. I don't even know if he tested it. This one person and one radio took the responsibility for his entire town, over 150 souls. He had nearly half of the citizenry flown to safety. He had fresh water, food, fuel, barbecues, tents, camping supplies, all of that, all delivered by helicopter. And all because he had a ham radio programmed on to the local repeater. The gentleman he was coordinating with, operating that local repeater, had never done net control before. He was a radio operator, or rather is a radio operator. He had used the radio a few times, participated in some events. He had never been net control. And it just fell upon his lap to do it. And he happened to have the equipment to stay on air. He burnt out a couple of radios doing that net control. He burnt out some high dollar equipment. Fortunately, it was known how important his work was. So the community, that army of the community, donated other radio equipment to him to keep him on air and working. Behind that, there was a bunch of volunteers that were monitoring that repeater, and in real time they could hear a distress signal come in. They could load a helicopter with supplies and get that into the field immediately before it was even a relayed dispatch. And they are responsible for making a huge difference, for directly saving lives, as well as very directly improving the quality of life for those that aren't being pulled out of the area. So the point of this video is the lessons we learned from Hurricane Helene is that you can overrun your radio equipment, overrun its duty cycle, and render the equipment useless. As a prepared mindedness person, you're always looking for ways to skirt that sort of thing. In my particular case, this is my high frequency setup. This radio does not have the best duty cycle. They are a darn good radio, I swear by them, but it's not the best duty cycle. It does run hot, and you can burn it out. Same with this amplifier to get the 20 watt radio to 100 watt output. You can see up above it, I've installed a heat sink and a fan that I'm able to kick in and help cool my amplifier. That'll help extend the run time. But if net control were to fall upon me, and I certainly hope it doesn't, I know a number of members of my immediate ham radio community with better equipment and more experience, better training. They'd be far better than I would. But then again, this Helene net control operator never did it before either, and probably didn't want the job. So if that falls on me, I start thinking about how my equipment can be used and extended universally. And the answer is quite clear. I'm going to select one of my two antennas. That's this radio box here, or this antenna switch here. On the A side, I have my 1-to-1 Bellin at 30 feet. It's a dual band antenna for 40 and 20 meters. On this side, I have the Chameleon MPass 2.0 with mill whip extension stashed in a tree out front. Depending on which bands I need to work, I'll decide what antenna I need to use. If I'm doing 20 and 40, I will pull these two connectors off. I'll put this one on the bottom, and then I'll connect my Xiegu radio to this one, and I'll take the radio from my truck, which is the Yaesu FTM 857D. I'll connect it to this side. And what that's going to enable me to do is at the flick of a switch, go from one radio to the other. When I do, I'll be taking the antenna offline for one radio, putting it online for the other, so I can leave the radio turned on and the fan running and just let it cool, throw the switch and begin transmitting and receiving on my other radio. by doing this, I can split my duty cycle. Say, throw the switch and change your radio every hour, hour and a half, depending on how hard you're driving your equipment. And that should solve my problem of burning out radio equipment halfway through an emergency when there's still people we're trying to save. Aside from that, that's all I wanted to throw at you is just radio duty cycle and how our experience during this hurricane is that we can certainly overdrive our duty cycles and burn our radios out, which is no good because that'll take you right off the air. Do leave your comments, thoughts, and opinions in the comment section. I love to read them. Have yourself a great day.